So welcome to the classroom copyright conundrum situations in education. I have a QR code so that you have my slides that you can have access to later. There's also a hyperlink bit.ly up there for you as well. I do have a Creative Commons license on here. It's further down. I should really add it towards the front too, but you're welcome to kind of use and change and share with your teachers as well. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to turn off my video though, because I can't see anyone, and that always makes me nervous when I can't see you because it's so strange. So, okay. I do want to start off with this slide. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a library media specialist, and we are dealing with some laws. So I'm not really giving you legal advice. I'm sharing my opinions. I'm sharing things that I've researched, things that I've learned. But I'm not a lawyer. So this is me. I am, like I said, I'm a librarian at an elementary school in Bentonville. I have kindergarten through fourth graders, but I also have been given the opportunity, and it's a fantastic opportunity to be an ambassador for our state of Arkansas for a company called Copyright and Creativity for Ethical Digital Citizens. I've presented with them several different places. I've presented at AIM multiple times. I got to present at ASL recently. That was fun. I've presented for Oklahoma Library Association. So I've had some amazing opportunities to talk about copyright. And so I'm just going to share some of the things that I've learned throughout the years with copyright and creativity. I do kind of want to know, we're going to spend 2 hours together. I want to know a little bit about you. So in the chat quickly, go ahead and tell me your name, where you're at, what you teach, because I'm kind of curious. I am going to put my chat box down, and Ashley told me that unfortunately when I do that, it kind of blacks the screen. So I'll put it over at the side. But I'll give you just a second to do that because I just want to quickly see where I have everyone from. Looks like we have someone on vacation doing this presentation. That's kind of cool. I'm jealous.
We did have people from out of state too.
Oh, okay. So maybe they're out of state.
I noticed when I looked at registration, we did have some people that were registered from other states. So that is super great that we're reaching out.
That's awesome. Oh yeah, I see Alabama. I'll just give you about 1 more minute. I like to scroll through too to see what levels y'all teach at, because that kind of helps me. All right, you can continue doing that because like I said, I'll check it every now and then just to kind of see. We do have a Padlet for this presentation. So I do want you to take a moment and join our Padlet for today. Let me go ahead and pull it up. Ashley, are you able to see it?
Yes, and I'll drop the direct link into the chat as well.
Perfect, thank you. So this Padlet we're going to use throughout. I've got 2 questions that I don't want you to answer yet. We're going to get to those shortly. But the one at the bottom, have any questions for me so far? If you have questions while I'm talking, and I know virtual presentations are a little different. Sometimes it's hard to just jump in and ask. If you have any questions that come up throughout my entire presentation, go ahead and just put it right here on the Padlet. And I have a spot where I'll stop and answer some questions throughout. Sorry, I didn't mean to go that far. And I wish this black box would go away for y'all. Trying to have it at the top where you can see. Hopefully you can see my screen. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do the first question on Padlet. what do you hope to get out of today's professional development? And I know some of you are probably here because you need the hours. Some of you may really be interested in copyright. But I kind of want to know. I kind of want to know what your thoughts are for today, why you registered. So just add that there for me to kind of see what you're hoping to get out of today's professional development. And all you have to do is underneath question number 1 on the Padlet, just hit add comment. Awesome. Thank you for those who are commenting. More knowledge about copyright. Some ideas to teach, ways to advise staff. These are all great things. Brush up on copyright laws. Oh, someone's attended my conference before, or my presentation before. Awesome, thanks.
I think this is like my 3rd time to go through this, and every time I still add to my notes. So I don't think there's too many times you can listen to this.
Well, copyright is there's so much involved in it, and I by no means know everything about copyright. But I'm also constantly changing my presentations up a little too to add. And these are all interesting things that you're wanting to know. Most of you are saying to help teachers and kiddos, what can I teach? But I saw one about online class copyright help too. I like that. I will tell you, if you haven't attended one of my presentations, I'm pretty laid back. I am a talker. If I talk too fast, just put it in the chat. Ashley will let me know. But those are all awesome things. Thank you. All right, well, let's get started. So here's our agenda for today, and we have quite a bit of time. This is the longest presentation that I've had as far as copyright. Usually I have to get this in, and Ashley and I actually talked about this. I usually have to get this presentation in within 45 minutes to an hour, and it's a lot of information to go over. So hopefully we have time to dig a little bit deeper than I normally do. But here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with copyright basics. It's always good to start there, kind of get our brains working again, and a good refresher of what copyright really is. Same for fair use. We're going to do a fair use overview. Then we're going to talk about some situations faced in education. These may be situations that we might see as educators ourselves. These could be issues out in the real world. And then we're going to end with resources to help you with copyright in your school. All right, so copyright basics. What does copyright cover? What are its limitations? So, copyright. Did you know that copyright covers any original creative work set down in fixed form? That's protected by copyright. That could be songs, it could be books, articles, photos, video games, movies, software, anything that is in an original creative work, and it's also in a fixed form. So it's got to be written down, recorded, digitally saved somehow. It's got to be set in that fixed form, but once it's done, even if it's something ridiculous, something that you didn't even think that it could be protected, once you've written it down or saved it, it is protected by copyright. Gone are the days of us having to go to the copyright office and getting it a license. You no longer have to do that. But there are 6 rights of copyright laws, and 3 of them really deal with ways that work is shared with the public. That's display, performance, digital performance. And these different rights are all variations on right of public performance. So for the purpose of education, we're just going to simplify those 6 rights down to just 4. And under those simplified rights, you as a creator get to decide who can make copies, including digital copies? Who can make derivatives? That's your sequels, your spin-offs from a book being made to a movie. Who can distribute those copies, display or perform the work in public? But copyright always has limitations too. Not everything is covered under copyright. Facts and ideas, non-creative lists such as maps, those things are not going to be covered because there's not creativity to them. So if you've got like the phone book, think of a phone list, even government documents, including websites, videos, and NASA. That's why, and NASA's kind of amazing. That's why I have a little picture down there, because they seem so creative, they're beautiful, but because it is a government website or a government entity, those are not covered by copyright. So that's an awesome thing for us in the classroom. Fair use. So fair use, we're going to dig a little deeper into fair use here in a little bit, but fair use is something in education that we've all at least heard of. We all kind of assume that fair use covers us with everything in education, which is not true, unfortunately. But fair use is a huge helper in education. And then copyright does expire. It expires, it falls into the public domain. In the United States, this includes creative work published more than 95 years ago. So that means in 2022, all works that were published before 1927. Everything published before 1927 has fallen into public domain. One example is The Great Gatsby. It just recently fell into the public domain, which means you could possibly get the PDF copy of that book and share with your class, and it's fine because it's no longer covered under copyright. For works created, this part gets a little iffy. Copyright law is really detailed. But for works created during the last 95 years, but before 1978, copyright status is more complicated and depends on whether copyright holders took the proper steps to register and renew their copyrights. So for works created since 1978, copyright protection is basically automatic and will not expire for 98 or for those 95 years. Okay, so I told you that I was an ambassador for copyright and creativity, and I want to, throughout this presentation, even though I'm going to share things about copyright, one of the things I do want to do is also share some of the things that they have for teachers. And one of the things they do is they have these amazing videos that they've created for us to use with our students. But I also like to use them in my presentations because they're really easy to follow along. And this is one on just the basics of copyright. We are going to watch this. It does take a little bit. I think it's about 7 minutes, but it's a really good introduction to copyright.
Technology is awesome, isn't it? Not that technology. I'm talking about the revolutionary technology invented hundreds of years ago, called the printing press.
Dude, that looks old.
Oh, it's old. 600 years old.
Before Gutenberg's printing press, if you wanted a book, someone had to copy it by hand. Only the richest people in the world could afford to buy books. Most people didn't have access to creative work at all. But the printing press changed all that. For the first time, mass production of books became possible, and big ideas could spread fast. An author could finally reach a mass audience, but also, for the first time, an author's life's work could be copied and sold by anyone with a printing press. Does that seem fair?
No way.
So, in 1710, the British government passed the Statute of Anne.
No unauthorized copying of a book for 14 years, with the option to renew for another 14.
By the way, unauthorized means without permission. So authors had time to earn some money from their work before it fell into the public domain. The idea was to encourage them to keep writing, which means even more creativity. Nice, huh?
Nice.
Fast forward 60 years. When it came time to write the Constitution, guess what? Our founding fathers included copyright.
To promote the progress of science and useful arts, by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries.
What?
The Constitution gives Congress the power to pass copyright laws, and as a result, authors have the right to get paid for their books and to decide who gets to make copies.
That makes sense. If you put in all the time to write a really good book that people want to read, you should be able to get paid for it.
And printing books was just the tip of the iceberg. Now I'm talking about your phone. In almost 600 years since Gutenberg's printing press, copying technologies have advanced from copy machines to tape recorders all the way to the internet and your phone. It's easier and easier to copy and distribute creative work all the time. And it's no longer just writings. Today, all it takes is just a few clicks to copy everything from music to video to software. In a world where copying is so easy, we still look to copyright to keep the creativity flowing.
So what does this mean for me? What does it mean for you?
For starters, it means you get a lot of control over your own work. When you make something, a story, photo, novel, poem, song, video, dance, Instapic, tweet, app, video game, even the doodle you drew on your napkin at lunch.
Sweet.
If it involves creativity and is written down, recorded, or saved, then it's protected by copyright, and in general, you get to decide who can make copies, distribute copies, display or perform the work in public, and make spin-offs. We call these derivatives. Like when a book is made into a movie or characters from a movie are made into action figures. You don't have to be a famous singer or artist. Copyright applies to you whenever you make something, whether you choose to share it with other people or not. This also means you can't just take someone else's creative work, like a song or movie or computer program, and post it online for everyone to download. And usually, you can't make copies or perform someone else's work without permission. These are illegal uses, and we call them infringements. Copyright protects creators from these kinds of infringements. Does that sound like a lot of protection? Well, it is. But copyright has some important limits built into it that also aim to encourage creativity. First of all, not everything is covered by copyright. Copyright does not protect facts and ideas. Facts and ideas are free for everyone to use. Same with government documents that include websites, videos, even pictures from outer space. No copyright on those. Second of all, copyright isn't just a one-way street protecting authors. It also protects reasonable uses of copyrighted work without permission. This is called fair use, and we think it's so important it needs a video of its own. Third, remember how the Constitution talks about giving rights for limited times? Eventually, copyright expires, and all creations become part of the public domain, where they are free for everyone to copy and share. In a world where technology makes it super easy to publish and share our creative work, it's more important than ever that we respect each other's creativity. Our online communities work best when we are free to express ourselves, and we can trust that those expressions are protected, with limits of course. So, a big thank you to technology and copyright and everything else that encourages free expression and creativity. What are you going to create next?
All right, so that's one of our videos. And again, that's just the brief introduction to copyright. I do share that with my fourth graders. We kind of talk about it a little, and then I share the video. They have lots of questions afterwards, but I do, again, share that with fourth grade. It actually, when it comes to copyright and creativity, they created that for middle school, but middle school for them is actually seventh grade and up. However, I've talked to the people at Copyright and Creativity a lot about how even fourth graders know a lot more about things than what we give them credit for because of how often they're on technology. All right, we're going to talk now about fair use. I'm not going to get real deep into fair use, but I do want to share with you how you can use this in school to make sure that you're covered. All right, so I know when I started out as a classroom teacher, I just assumed fair use covered me for everything. I didn't know a lot about fair use, and I definitely never questioned it because I assumed if I'm using it in my classroom for a lesson, then I'm good. That's not exactly the case. Fair use does have what's called a 4-factor test that needs to be used when you're deciding if copyrighted work can be used without the permission of the creator. You can always ask the creator for permission. Sometimes that takes a long time though, so it's not something that we always want to do or have time to do. So fair use is where that helps us in purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, research. Those things are all covered under fair use. Again, you don't have to ask permission and try to decide if you're covered under fair use. It's kind of like double dipping. You just have to do for sure one or the other. Don't just assume because you're in your classroom, or definitely because you're in your virtual classroom, that you're covered under fair use. So one of the things that the courts look at is what's called this 4-factor test. So they have 4 different factors that they're going to look at in depth. Technically, the courts are going to look at all 4 of them weighted the exact same, okay? However, there is one that I'll point out that is probably the most important, but as far as when we really look at it, technically they're all supposed to be equal. The first one is called the purpose and character of your use. This addresses the how and the why really will your work, how's it going to be used? If this work, if your use is for non-commercial purposes, then it's likely going to be fair use. So again, in your classroom, if that's your purpose is to use it with your students, you're not trying to sell anything, you're more than likely going to be okay. If the purpose is cited specifically in the law, like criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, again, fair use. If the new work is transformative, that if it uses the original to make something different and new, that has a different message or purpose from the original, again, it's going to be considered a fair use. When the courts look at an object that you're using, and let's say like Harry Potter, and they consider that to be extremely creative, that's where you have to be really careful. If you can transform whatever you're using enough though, then they're going to say that it is transformative, it's different from the original, you're okay. And I'm going to show you some examples of that when we get further into the presentation. Factor 2, and I kind of was just talking about that, is the nature of the original. It looks at how creative that work is. When the original work is highly creative, it's less likely to be considered fair use. The more informational or factual work is, the more likely it will be considered fair use. So again, remember, list, government documents, those things that are extremely factual, those aren't covered in copyright. So if what you're using leans more towards that, you're going to be okay. If a work has not been published, using it is less likely. Why? Because that artist may not consider the work finished, or maybe waiting to publish it at a later date. So it might impact their future sales or the reputation of that artist because their work's considered still in progress. So that one is going to get you a little bit more. The third factor, this is probably the biggest one that you really want to look at, is the effect on the market. Logically, the greater the impact of loss of sales, the more likely it will not be fair use. So you really want to think about that. If you are affecting that creator, especially how much money they're going to make. I look at this one as a library media specialist, and I think about those authors, their creators, that's their job, they're making money. If I'm affecting that by scanning my books into a Google document for all to see, that's affecting their market. And that's not going to be considered fair use because I'm keeping that book from being sold. The last one is amount and substance of what you're using, the amount and portion that you're going to use of that creative work. This addresses the quantity and the quality of the work that you are using. Using less or a very small portion, and this, will help those of you, especially like in high school, that are doing projects. If they're going to use just a small portion of something, like maybe even a small portion of a song or a small portion of a poem, then it's going to be more likely fair use. But when you start to use the entire thing, like an entire song, you're more than likely not going to have fair use to help you there. So using an amount necessary to make a comment or a point for a parody, that's an example, is more likely fair use. However, taking the heart of the entire work is not going to be considered fair use. So we're going to watch another short video. This one's shorter, but this is the fair use portion of our curriculum.
But what about all the creative work out there that is protected by copyright? Like new songs and movies? Do I always need permission before I can reuse someone else's creative work?
Sometimes you don't. There's this really important part of copyright called fair use. It allows us to use copyrighted work in limited ways that are still fair to the artist.
I guess that's why it's called fair use.
Fair use shows up in a lot of news reporting, commentary, education, and in new creative works that use others' work in entirely new ways.
Do you want some exposition? Some information through a song?
Quoting from a book or showing a movie excerpt as part of a review is fair use. Recording a TV show on a DVR so you can watch it later is fair use. Fair use is decided on a case-by-case basis using a 4-factor legal test. The 4 factors are weighed together to decide if you have a fair use or not. Number 1 is the purpose and character of your use. If your use is for commentary, news reporting, criticism, or education, then that favors fair use. For example, using a copyrighted song in a school project for a real educational purpose, that's usually a fair use. However, if you take your school project and want to publish it online, then you have more to consider. Like how much of the song have you used, and will it hurt the market by being a substitute for the original? One key question that the courts like to ask regarding this first factor is, has the material you've taken from the original work been transformed by adding new expression or meaning? So it becomes part of a genuinely new work, rather than just repackaging the original. Next, think about the original you want to use. How creative is it? Is it highly creative or just a bunch of info? The more creative and original it is, the stronger the copyright protections are.
Oh, I get it. Like Harry Potter is super creative, but a video of facts about fungi? Not so much.
Right. Next ask, how much have you used? Did I use more than was necessary to make my point? Did I take the heart of the thing? These will hurt your fair use claim. Lastly ask, could my use of this work replace the original in the marketplace? Could it undermine the creator's ability to sell or make money from the work? For example, if I take a whole movie and add a minute of commentary to the beginning of the film to say, this is a great movie, I think everyone should see it, let's watch, and then I copy the whole movie to my short commentary and upload it to my blog, that is not a fair use. Just consider the factors we discussed. It's not highly new and original. It used the whole thing, not a small portion. And because the whole thing is there, it would be able to substitute for the original in the marketplace. On the other hand, if I make a video of me explaining why I think it's such a great movie, a genuine commentary, and I show only a short clip, for example, to illustrate a strong protagonist, that would be a fair use. Here's a real-life example. The makers of the movie biography about the famous heavyweight boxer, Muhammad Ali, did something similar. They used a short clip, just 41 seconds, from one of his boxing matches in their film. When the owner of the footage objected, a court ruled that it was fair use because the amount of footage was small, and reusing it in this way wouldn't affect the owner's market. Remember, the 4 factors have to be considered together to decide if your use is a fair use, and not just illegally copying someone else's work. So that's fair use. It means that sometimes you can use a copyrighted work without the author's permission, but you do have to think carefully about things like why you're using it, how much you use, and whether your use could hurt the sales of the work.
All right, so that's fair use. And again, this is something you can easily show with your students. It's good for them to know too, because they're going to do projects and things that we ask them to do. And it's good for them to understand why. When we get later on, when I start to give you examples to use with your students or lessons, we're going to talk about how to keep it positive. Copyright is such a heavy topic. It can be very negative, and you want to stay positive. So we want to think of people as creators and consumers. That keeps it positive, but that also helps the students relate to this topic more. And we'll talk about that more later, but that's a reason why we even want to talk about fair use with them. Now, again, with my elementary kids, I do not get deep into fair use, but I do bring it up. We do talk about it.
Hey, Brittany,
All
you
right.
did have a question in the chat about fair use.
Oh,
During
yeah, I
the
can't see the
video,
chat.
Kathy wondered what is considered a small amount. Is there a specific time limit or page limit depending on the length?
That's actually a really good question, and I have never found a specific answer. From everything that I have been told, I mean, the law is not black and white, unfortunately, with copyright law. Copyright and creativity has an actual lawyer that's like in charge of everything, and everything that we do curriculum wise and things have to go through him, but he's also a great place to go and ask these questions to. And he tells us all the time that copyright's really not black and white. And it's so hard to have a definite answer. And this is one of them that I don't have a definite answer to. What I'm always told is you have to look at the heart, the big meat. And that's really hard when you have like a book. You kind of have to look at what's the most important part. Same with poetry. I think, if you can justify the amount that you are needing, that's probably going to be the biggest thing. Music's different, and music's probably one of the worst to work with as far as copyright, because music copyright is held by so many different people. And you notice, and a lot of this hits schools too, when you have music, you'll get hit harder on YouTube or Facebook. They'll shut you down easier with music. I feel like I'm really not helping you with this at all, but it's not set in stone. You're just gonna have to look at it. As far as time limit with music, because I feel like that's probably one of the biggest ones to worry about. You just need to make sure you're not using a big portion of it. If you can use enough that is getting what you need, what you want to portray for whatever you're using it for, especially with this, really what I would worry about, Kathy, is when you're starting to talking about using things and posting it online. Even when it comes to your online classrooms, that's where it's going to get you. When you're in your classroom and you're using an entire amount of a song, that's okay because you're in your classroom and you're using it right then. You're not recording it to anything. You're not sending it out there. Same with the book. You're reading a book with students, you're studying that book. It's when you start making copies of it and sending it out, distributing those copies, that's where you have to be really careful. I would just really look at it as, what is your purpose and how much of that do you actually need? And that's the best answer I have. And I hope that answer was okay. Were there any other questions? Oh, okay, thank you, Kathy. All right, I actually do want to stop here, and I want to ask you a question on Padlet. I want to kind of know, why do you think teaching copyright is important to your students, even all the way down to kindergarten all the way up? And what resources do you use with your students to teach it? And I'll give you a few minutes to do that. While y'all are typing, one of the comments on here brought up Arkansas Traveler, and I just want to mention how lucky we are in the state of Arkansas to have a state library that has that for us. I was in a meeting with Copyright and Creativity the other day, and one of the things that we were told was to be careful with things with World Book and stuff, because people can break copyright laws when it comes to World Book, because again, it's a subscription. And I always forget that sometimes, because in education here in Arkansas, we're able to use things like that. It's wonderful. Yes, because they are creators too. They need to know that their work is important and is protected.
And I put the link to the traveler databases in the chat if you have never heard of them or used them.
Yeah, it's a great resource. Someone said they focus on plagiarism and don't go in depth with copyright. They are totally different too. I mean, they kind of go together, but they're totally different. When we're teaching citing sources, that's not copyright. I can cite sources, but still have a copyright infringement because I didn't get permission. And we all know you can ask permission to use someone's work and it still be plagiarism, right? A kid can ask someone, can I use your paper? And they say yes, but they ask permission, but it's still plagiarism. So it is good to talk to your kids about both. Copyright's it's a hard one. I find that copyright is really important nowadays though, because of all of the social media and technology that the kids are using in and outside of school. I'm going to give you just a minute to finish up if anyone else wants to add. Thank you to everyone who is adding on the Padlet. I like how someone said it's a good character building lesson, and I'm actually going to talk about that too when we get to talk about resources. Teachers need to know too. And I will tell you, and I know firsthand, it's hard to talk to other teachers about copyright. It's hard because you feel like you're being so negative. You have to be the bearer of bad news. I talked to a first year teacher this past school year, and her face when I made a comment, and she'd asked me a question, I was just giving her an answer, and you would have thought I was the worst person in the world because she'd never been told no when it came to this. And I felt awful, but I mean, it's something that we have to, and I don't know how many in here are library media specialists, but as far as library media specialist goes, it's, it's in our curriculum, but it's something that we should know about. And we need to at least be able to tell our staff at least once, make them aware, because you don't want it to come back on you. So with that said, let's talk about situations faced in education. And I did have the bit.ly here in case anyone joined late. That way it was there in case you needed to get to the presentation. All right, so I do want to preface this by how I came up with this slide. When COVID year, or the first year back with COVID, I guess, I'm trying to figure out how to really explain that. Our first year back when everything was half virtual, some of our students were virtual, some of them were in person, things were just crazy. We all remember how that was. One of the high schools in my district, we have 2 high schools, and one of the high schools in my district called me, and their library called me, and she was like, I need help. Our curriculum director is walking around these teachers' classrooms, and she is not happy by what she's seen in person and virtual, and she feels like they're breaking copyright laws. And she's like, I've got to make a really quick presentation for my admin. She wants me to make it, but the admin's present it. And so her and I worked together. We actually emailed out to staff across the district to ask about things that they had actually seen themselves. My husband's he's an 8th grade English teacher, so in my district. So I talked to him as well, things that he has seen on the junior high level. And we came up with some of these common violations in schools. Her and I both were really excited that the curriculum director cared that copyright violations were going on, and it bothered her because you don't always see that. So here goes the list that I got back from multiple people. This is kind of what we put together for the administration, but we also came up with ways and resources to help them as well, and I'll share that all with you. All right, so let's look at them. First one being using illegally uploaded YouTube videos. So that could be things like Brain Pop, Vocabulary. Those are subscription services that someone has videoed with their phone, or they've, screenshot it, screencast it, recorded it, and put it up on YouTube. Those are all on there, but they're illegal. They're uploaded illegally. And I will tell you, YouTube does have copyright policies. It tries to catch them. I actually have been flagged before from copyright. I actually had permission, so I was able to send that in and get my video unflagged. However, they don't catch everything. But this is something that is happening, but those are subscription services. You pay for those. People pay to use those in their classrooms. They pay to use them in their schools. It's not something that's free on YouTube. So if you are using them, understand that they're illegally uploaded. And what my biggest thing is as a presenter and as an educator is, if I'm going to teach it to my students and I'm going to talk to people about copyright, then I have got to try to be a good mentor in not using those things that are illegally uploaded. I might use it. I'm not going to get caught. I'm not going to get a copyright infringement put on me. However, I am trying to show my students the right way to do things. So myself as a consumer, I need to be that good role model. And that's the biggest thing that I want to say to you is try to remember that we are role models for not just our students, but our teachers that we work with as well. And even though it might make our life harder sometimes, it's really important because we can't turn around and talk to them about copyright if we're also using illegally used videos or any kind of copyright infringed objects.
Now, like Vocabulary and Brain Pop have their own YouTube channels. So if something comes from those channels where they have directly uploaded it.
Yep. And there's other things like we're going to talk about Netflix too. And Netflix has their own YouTube channel. Anything that is a YouTube channel from that company, that's totally different. I'm mainly talking about and I use Brain Pop and Vocabulary as an example because that was actually something that was, I guess, mentioned from a teacher when I asked those questions. They were talking about the ones that are just on someone's personal YouTube page. Those are the ones you really need to look out for. And again, movies videoed on a phone. If it's someone's personal YouTube channel and they have a full-fledged movie on there that you have for free, then it's not, that one's illegally uploaded. Yes, thank you for clarifying that, Ashley. Another one, this one was brought up by the English department in our district, and it was PDF copies of books. I guess what was happening was people were going into Google, they were and I'm going to use The Hate You Give. They were Googling The Hate You Give, and they were finding full PDF copies of this book, and they were downloading it, making copies, sharing it with other teachers, giving it to students to use in their classrooms. However, The Hate You Give is not out of copyright, so there shouldn't be any PDF copies for free online. So that one, again, whoever put that PDF copy up, that was a copyright infringement. You are keeping that author from making money. You're affecting her market. This is one that not everyone knows about, but showing movies, and this could be like at recess, lunch, maybe even PTO events that you're charging admission to. I'm not saying you can't show movies at recess or lunch or at PTO events. What I'm saying is you have to have a license. If you don't have a license or your school doesn't have a license, you actually cannot show that. There is a disclaimer, we've all seen it, because the kids and I talk about it and the kids will tell you they've seen it. There's a disclaimer at the beginning of movies that says this is for personal use only or private, I can't remember how it's really worded, private showings only. That's not your classroom. You can't do that. So you have to have a license. The Federal Copyright Act actually requires schools to get proper licensing for public performances, defined as any movie showing outside of the person's home. You just buying or renting a movie actually does not give schools the right to screen a movie, regardless of whether teachers charge an admission fee or if the movie is, if you're letting them in for free, or how old the movie is. You have to have a license. There's some great ones out there. We use Swank Media. There may be other ones too, but that's just the one that we use. It doesn't cover everything. It does cover a lot. And Ashley, just let me know if there's any questions too, because I feel like I'm going fast.
Okay, so far you're good.
Okay. All right. Ashley and I were just talking about this before we started. Sharing teachers pay teachers. And funny enough, I did a podcast one time with the lawyer of copyright and creativity. He had no idea what I was talking about. He didn't even know what teachers pay teachers were. But this is a big issue because when we use teachers pay teachers, or if you do, you usually only purchase one license, right? Well, I know grade levels that buy one license and they share it amongst the 3, 4, 5 teachers in their grade level. But that's really not what your license says. You bought for one classroom. You didn't buy for the entire grade level or for the entire school. And again, because the kids always ask this, if I do this, are the cops going to come and get me right then? You may not ever be caught, but it goes back to, and I know people who share and sell stuff on teachers pay teachers. You're affecting their market. Some of those are teachers who no longer teach anymore. Maybe that's their full income. Well, you're affecting that market because you're keeping them from actually having their product purchased by all of those teachers instead of just one teacher sharing it with all of them. I know that one's kind of a bearer of bad news, and teachers hate to hear that one, but in truth, you got to buy the correct license for it. All right, Read-Alouds. This was a big one, especially during COVID time when we did have so many virtual classes. I know for my school district in Bentonville, Bentonville doesn't have, we have a virtual school, but it has gone down dramatically. It's really tiny this coming school year. Whereas during COVID, I had certain virtual classes that I had my own virtual students. We had virtual teachers that were housed in my school. It's not like that anymore. But when it was, this part was huge for us. And it probably was for other people as well. We're going to talk about this a little bit later because it is something that I'm still asked a lot when I'm at conferences, but using read-aloud books found on YouTube. Please don't worry that I'm going to tell you it's awful and you shouldn't do it, because I'm not. I'm just going to give you some really good resources and tips to do this correctly. Okay, terms of service. When the librarian from Bentonville was asking me, Bentonville High School was asking me to help with this actually was one of the things that the curriculum director was really upset about. She had been noticing people using their own Netflix accounts in the classrooms. And she wanted us to put in the presentation and come down on them and tell them, you can't do that. That's copyright infringement. It's actually not. I asked the lawyer, he cannot find this in copyright law at all yet. It's not copyright, it's a terms of service issue. So with that being said, if you are using Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, whatever streaming service that you personally have an account through, it's not copyright if you're using it in your class. It's actually a terms of service issue, and they actually can close your account. When you have subscription services like Netflix, the terms of service that they make you agree to when you sign up, it says content can be accessed for personal and non-commercial private use. And because it's worded like that, again, it doesn't mean your classroom. Netflix is actually trying to work with educators on this. And I've got hyperlinks added, and it's a slide, I think here in a minute, I'll share with you. But Netflix is trying to work on it. They, because in theory, they can actually cancel your subscription. And I know that they are starting to crack down a little. They are starting, one teacher at one of my last workshops told me that they actually had been contacted because their account had been picked up being used in places that it shouldn't. So Netflix is really kind of starting to crack down. So what they've done instead is one, they do have a really good YouTube channel. They have some great things on there, but they also have content just for educators. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not the videos that we probably wanted to show. However, they do have a library of free videos for educators to use, and I'll share that with you here in a little bit. But do we have any questions before I move off of this slide? Okay. All right, I do kind of want to share that, even though we don't hear of copyright infringement happening that often in schools, and a lot of teachers are like, that's why I don't worry about it, I'm not going to get caught. I do want you to know that there are some actual school issues that are pretty big. Now, when you have copyright infringement and it finally makes it to court, it can take forever to be settled out. So some cases have been going on for a really long time. But there are a few cases that I did want to kind of bring to your attention. Some of these you've probably heard of, but this first one, and this first one is called Dyna Study Inc. versus Houston Independent School District. So Houston Independent School District's not small; it's a really big school district, and it was one of their high schools. It was one of their high schools that this happened with. What happened is Dyna Study had, and if I remember right, I think it was a biology study guide. Anyway, the school had bought these study guides, but they only bought so many. What the principal and some teachers decided to do was they needed more copies, and they wanted copies for these students to take home to study with. The problem with it was that they made these copies, but when they got to looking at it, they had actually covered the bottom where it had the copyright little protection thing on there. So at the very bottom of the study guide, it had something about copyright, not to be copies made. It had all of that stuff on there about copyright protected. Well, they actually covered it. That way you couldn't see it when they made copies. That's kind of how it started to get caught, how Dyna Study caught onto it, because they were not only just making copies, they were sharing the documents over the internet to students. When Dyna Study reached out to them to ask them to stop, there were email chains from the administration to teachers about how they were going to continue to hide it. They were asked to initially settle out. The school didn't want to. They continued to say that they were not guilty. Unfortunately, there were a lot of evidence. They were charged $9.2 million. They did finally settle with $7.8 million. However, it was only like $7 million initially that they were offered to settle with. So they ended up getting charged more if they would have just settled. But that was a really big case. You can look it up very easily and find out all the stuff for it. But again, that issue is because they affected the market. They making all those copies of those study guides was affecting Dyna Study's sales. Instead of buying more, they made their own. The next one actually got some really bad press, but the next one was Disney. And now Disney's done this multiple times, but this was one that kind of really made news. So this PTO or PTA at this school in California, it was an elementary school. This happened in 2020. They had a parents' night out event, and it was a group of dads actually that was running it. They were going to show the new live action Lion King at this PTO event. They raised around $800 because they charged people admission. Well, someone who worked for Disney, actually, I guess, I can't remember if someone who worked for Disney dropped their kid off. I don't remember how it got caught, but it caught because someone who worked at Disney saw it. They fined them. They told them, you can't do that anymore. We're fining you $250. And in the grand scheme of things, $250 is not that big of a deal. And if you read some articles about it, one of the PTO guys actually said, we're just going to pay the $250 and lesson learned, right? Disney actually got a lot of flack for charging an elementary school money. They did come out and apologize. However, I will tell you, Disney doesn't really play around with copyright. They're going to usually they're going to usually reach out to you and ask you to cease and desist very quickly, because they're probably one of the biggest components for copyright laws, especially now. They want them changed and updated. But again, the school did get charged for playing the screening of The Lion King. They got charged, by the way, because they did not have a license. They had no license to show the movie. They were doing it anyway. They were charging admission. And again, they made enough to cover the fine. Disney ended up giving them the money back because they got so much bad flack about it. But that doesn't mean I would go and continue to do it and hope that Disney would do the same for you. And then the last one is actually a positive. The last one is kind of like a fair use claim. This one did go to court. This was a school district whose, they had some of the sports teams that were using a quote that they had found, and they were using it on like the sports Twitter pages. Well, the sports psychologist who the quote was from, it was from one of his books. He actually won an infringement claim put on the school for it. Well, when it went to court, because it was just a passage, it was just a quote, the court said it was totally fair use because, number one, it was a school, and two, they were only using a small portion. So they claimed fair use and the school won. So not everything's bad. Some of those actually turn out good. And then this next one, I share with my students. Now, my students don't know this book. I don't even talk to them about the book because when I share this, I share it with fourth graders. This is not a fourth grade book, but the example is great. I also have hyperlinked this right here, examples to use with students, because not all of mine, I will tell you it's interesting. When you get in depth to talking about copyright, it never fails that I usually have 4 or 5 classes of fourth grade. And each of those fourth grade, my lessons end up changing depending on the class because of how much knowledge they have. I might have one day that this one class knows so much about copyright or TikTok or YouTube, and then the next day, those kids really don't. So this is one that I last year had to actually show them. They wanted to see actual copyright infringement cases. They didn't care if it had anything to do with school. They just wanted to see some real ones that they may know about. So I actually hyperlinked that so that you could use too. So once you get to my bit.ly and you have this presentation, you can see that hyperlink there.
I used that same example with some 6th graders that you have on the screen because I thought it was really interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it? So here's the story to it. The Poet X, of course, you see all the awards it won. This is the actual picture. So this was a photographer. She is a professional photographer. She has her own website. She took a self-portrait of herself, had it on her website. Well, the graphic design artist for the Poet X, and it has nothing to do with the artist, with the author, but the graphic design who created the book cover, he saw it on her website, he liked it, so he supposedly transformed it, and this is what it is. Some of her fans got mad, went to Twitter, and this is the part that I show the kids. And they did in like an overlap of it. And the whole point of it is that it's not transformative enough. So I'll let you see it again. That they didn't change, that the graphic design artist didn't change the original picture enough to make it transformative. I actually looked it up the other day and it has not settled out of court yet. It's still in court. And I can't remember, you can tell me if I'm wrong, Ashley. I'm wanting to think this happened like in 2019, maybe. I don't remember. Now, initially, the photographer said this was plagiarism. She felt it was plagiarism because they didn't, cite her name. However, it's not plagiarism, it was copyright infringement. They didn't ask her permission to use it. My students were like, but wouldn't she want her face on a book cover? And of course, her answer to that is yes, she does. She thinks that's cool to have her face plastered all over stuff. It's just that she didn't know. She didn't know initially, and she would have liked to have known and liked to have said, yes, you can use my picture. So anyway, it's a really interesting article. If you've never read the article about it or it's fun to actually show it with your kids to see what your kids think. Ashley, what did your sixth graders think about it?
They thought that it was really interesting because they take pictures of themselves, selfies all the time. And that's what her photo was a self-portrait, and post on social media. And normally the photographer would sell those, they sell their images. So it also, they said, would take away from her making money because she could have sold the rights to the book or to the graphic designer to be able to use something. So they really enjoyed looking at how even taking photographs or original drawings that you share on your social media pages or post publicly could even be taken without permission.
Yep. And from one of the things that I read, some of the interviews with the photographer, and I can't remember her name, but she would have told them yes, because she thinks it's cool to have her face everywhere. But I think it goes back to, she's a professional photographer. She definitely would have sold it, and she didn't. So, but I know that one of the articles I read that the publishing company did come out and apologize to her. And again, it hasn't been settled yet. So I'm kind of curious to see what ends up happening. Are there any questions? It's so funny being on virtual presentations because it's so quiet and I can't see faces. And all right, so we are going to stop. I want you, if you have any questions, to go ahead and put them on Padlet. We can stop and talk about them. I've kind of been checking. No one has put anything so far, but I've kind of thrown a lot at you. So I'm curious to see if you have anything. You don't even have to put on Padlet if you want to actually pop in and talk. I'm fine with that too, because we're doing good on time. So if you have any questions, now's the time. Nobody? No questions?
I don't see any questions on the Padlet or in the chat.
I don't either.
No, I have a question.
Okay, go for it.
Come on. Do you have something that you send out to your teachers at the beginning of the year? Since I don't do a PD or anything with them, or just a brief summary of any of this. Do you have something that you made that you would mind sharing that you send out to your staff?
Yeah, let me look and I can send it to, I don't know, I'll give you my email at the very end too, if you just want to, because I can't see who's talking. Will you tell me who's talking?
This is Kim Simpson.
Hi, Kim. If you want to get my email, and then, yeah, I will send you whatever. Sometimes I do it differently. There's times that I have, I put together, because I don't ever get a chance to do the PD either. Elementary, I'm never asked to go over copyright with teachers. But a lot of times I try to put it in like a back to teacher packet that I hand out. So I found that's kind of the easiest way, because there's some years that he may give me just a few minutes to talk to him, and copyright's never enough time to quickly go over that. So I try to just put important information and then I hand it out, and I put like library passes in there, things that will make them actually go through it. But that's a good place that you could put copyright to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Oh, okay, so this is a good one. So is it or isn't it okay for teachers to show movies in their classrooms? It is okay, but you need to make sure that your school has a license. Now, you can consider it fair use if you're doing it with a lesson, but when you're just doing it for like recess or in the lunchroom, like my husband's school sometimes will just put on a movie while they're eating lunch. Especially if it's rainy, you really can't do that unless you have a license. So please don't think that you can't show a movie, because you most definitely can, especially if it's tied to your curriculum and you can claim fair use for it. But you need to make sure that you have a license if you're going to do it any other time. Does that help? Hope that helps. Yeah, I don't want you to be scared of using things when it comes to copyright, because if you can give your good purpose of why you are using it, you're going to be okay. I just bring up the movie one because a lot of times we show it for inside recess or just for fun. That has absolutely nothing to do with their curriculum. So you can't claim fair use because you're not tying it to anything that you're teaching. But that's why, and you can check with a lot of library media specialists because they usually are the ones that might know, or sometimes it's your tech people. But like for us, Bentonville, they pay for a movie license for all elementaries. And then our upper levels, the librarians have to purchase it themselves. Oh, okay. So the next question was, can we discuss terms of service? I have had teachers who show movies from their personal accounts. Yes. So technically they're not supposed to, but here's what I try to tell people when they've asked me. I've had teachers ask, I mean, it's their account. So it's not a copyright infringement issue. It's a terms of service, which means they can have their subscription canceled. And if that's something that they want to try, then I guess go for it. Because if it happens, at least you can say, well, I tried to warn you. I've had teachers tell me, well, I pay for the account, but that's not what you agreed to when you signed your subscription terms. You know, it's a personal account, not your school account. So, I mean,
I dropped an image in the chat, Brittany. I actually asked this on Twitter, and Netflix was the only one I believe that responded. Hulu may have as well. But I asked, you know, what our educators are allowed to do, because I had so many questions, and I wanted a response directly from the source. And they said, there are educational documentaries that are available for one-time use. But pretty much that's it. Like, you can't just stream from your account. And I have something from Netflix too, because it's on their website. You just have to go look for it. Yep. So they're personally responsible, Kathy. That is 100% correct. I have that in the next few slides. I can't remember if it's the next one or how far down it is, but I have that too. I think I saw that you had asked that on Twitter, Ashley, and that was good. I can't remember. I've got stuff for Amazon Prime too. They do not have anything for educators yet, but yeah, they all say that it's personal use only. You are not to be using that in your classrooms, but people do it anyway. I have a reply from Capstone about recording read-alouds, whether it's video or audio as well. Oh, you do? Okay, will you share that when we get to read-alouds? Sure. Perfect. Okay, we had a few more questions. Let's see. Okay, so this question is, thinking of what you just discussed with the poet book, can teachers recreate or draw storybook characters for school decorations? Well, I don't have the answer to that because I'm not a lawyer, and I know people do it. I would say be careful. You know, sometimes if you're using it just in your own classroom or your own library, but I have seen when I was doing some research for copyright infringement issues that Disney actually has fined some preschools because they did the decorations on their outside window for everyone to see. So if you're just doing it for decorations, I might be careful if you didn't pay for it. I've actually had students ask that. We have a teacher who has the cutest classroom and it's all Disney. It's all Disney. However, she purchased all of it. And so we have to talk about how she paid for it. She has, you know, the license or whatever. And we've even had to show the kids before on posters where, you know, it was okay because they bought the poster. But that would be more my opinion, and just I would just be careful. I definitely wouldn't do it for a big event where it's going to be out there for everyone to see. If it's tied to a lesson and you can claim fair use for it, then you're okay. Hope that helps. How do schools go about gaining a license or permission to show a movie for special events like the PTO example? I'm not sure if you, and Ashley, you may know this, I've never actually looked into this. I don't know if you can get a one-time showing. You might can. Most of the license that I know, they cover you for a certain amount of time. So you just pay for that. Swank Media, and I can put that in the chat. That's who we use.
they have like, you pay for their license, and then can you tell I can't type and talk at the same time?
You can actually get a single-use license from Swank. The thing to remember with movie licensing is they're not universal.
That's
like Swank only covers certain production companies. I think like Paramount, HBO, Lionsgate, those are covered under Swank. Disney is not. Disney would be covered under a separate licensing. I think like Swank covers DreamWorks too.
I think it does too. And you have to look, because it's not going to be all the movies for sure. You can't just assume that because we've had that issue before, that we pay for this movie license and we're covered for everything, and you're not. You can go on their website and browse. But that's a really good question. I've never had to buy one. So I wasn't sure about the single license or not.
I know a PTO group that I actually volunteered for in my kids' elementary. We had a movie license because they did like monthly movie nights as fundraisers, but they wanted to show a movie that was not covered under the production companies that we had purchased. So we ended up having to buy a single-use license for that one particular movie. And we just kind of outweighed whether or not it was worth it to show that movie based on how much we would spend.
Yep.
Versus just choosing something else.
Yep. And again, a lot of people, go back to that. Well, I don't think I'll be caught. It's not that big of a deal. But I mean, you could. It goes back to that, your role model. But those are really good questions. Does anyone have anything else before we keep going? All right. Well, now we're going to talk about resources. So this is pretty much what we're going to talk about the rest of the time. I'm going to give you stuff that you can use in your classes, that you can use with your teachers. Oh, and I did read in the chat, Terry, yes, I can share with you what's in my back to school teacher packet, but just remind me, because I might forget. But you know how to email me, Terry. But that was a good question. Okay, so resources to help with copyright in your schools. All right, we're going to start with read-alouds first, because I kind of skipped that earlier, so I just want to go ahead and put this one out there. So with read-alouds, this is one that I know for me personally in my own elementary school, it has gotten to where, and I know COVID is the reason why it has gotten like this, but I have noticed that instead of buying books, a lot of teachers, and I don't blame my teachers per se for this, but instead of buying the books, they just go on YouTube. But then I've had teachers come to me and say, the book's gone. What am I going to do? But that's the thing, because they don't always stay on YouTube either. Because especially if you were starting to look, like Ashley mentioned Capstone and their permissions, if you start to look at the permissions, which School Library Journal had a great list of permissions back when we were all in the middle of COVID. One of the things that some of the publishers tell you is they want you taking that video down. So they're not always going to be up there. But I am going to give you some resources that are going to be helpful, because I do know that there are times that you need that book on YouTube. I get it. Okay, but I'm going to start with scenarios. The first one. We have a daily read aloud from a chapter book. We have a teacher, and I kind of want you to think virtual classroom here. A teacher who regularly begins a class session with a chapter from a novel. She might do it, or he might do it, to orient students in a physical classroom and to get them focused for learning. They adapt that practice for their virtual learning, okay? My husband last year taught a virtual class, and then his next class was going to be a regular in-person class. And he was having to he was hoping to do the same lessons, for both. So translating this practice to your online learning by posting one chapter per day on a learning management system as an introductory exercise, or maybe this teacher is streaming it on commercial platform like Facebook or Instagram to prompt students to get online and start focusing. Is this okay? And you can just put it in chat. Yes, you think it is. No, you think it's not. Do you think this is okay, or is it an infringement? Just curious. No one has any thoughts? Closed platform, yes, yes. Public platform, no. So it is okay, especially if it's a closed platform. When my district was doing it, we actually all had to have YouTube channels just because of how we were putting it out there. But we had to have an unlisted YouTube channel. But yes, it is okay, because you've got to make one of the things, and I'll share it with you here in a little bit, but one of the things that you have to make sure when you are doing online read-alouds too, is you've got to make sure that your purpose is clear, because fair use does not translate the exact same as it would in your in-person classroom. Just because you do it in your in-person classroom doesn't mean it's okay in your digital virtual classroom. So you have to be careful with having those closed platforms. Those are really going to help you. And you can do that. I did that. I would do that just to get the kids, because actually my library was closed. We weren't even allowed. I'm a shared library, which means my elementary and middle are connected. We service about 1,200 kids. So the elementary students weren't allowed in the library. My administrator didn't want to have to worry about that, so he closed our side. So because of that, I had to find ways to connect to my kids. And yes, they still got library books. I had to bring them to them. They requested them. It was all kinds of stuff. But I still had to find ways to connect to get them to know, number one, about new books that we had. And so that was one way that I might do it. And I did do, for 4th grade and 3rd grade, I think, I would do, not a daily, but I would do like a weekly read aloud from a chapter book. But again, it was on a closed site. I also, if you start looking at permissions, I would take them down after so long. Because as long as you're doing it and number one, you know your fair use is okay, you just got to make sure that you're in a closed site. Now, I do want to say that if you got permission from the publisher, you don't have to worry about fair use, because if you got permission from the publisher, you were okay to read that out loud. Now, a lot of them are going to tell you to take it down after so long. But again, you don't have to ask permission and try to make sure you're covered under fair use. You do not have to do both. If you know that you're protected under fair use, then you're okay. I don't know if any of you noticed that a lot of public libraries did this. Well, I have an article that I'll give you here in a minute that it talks about having, we have story times as librarians, and that builds a sense of community. Well, that sense of community is your purpose, and that really helps with your fair use case. But let's talk about scenario number 2. This is a free personal. So let's just say I decided I was going to have a personal YouTube channel, and I've established this channel so that I know that teachers, moms, dads, whoever, have a wide range of picture books and early chapter books available to them. I want to be able to have a great curated list of books for kids, and I have those books on there for free, and I'm reading them on my own personal channel. But my personal channel also posts ads for educational products and services. I just want to be helpful. What do you think? I feel bad for those new teachers who don't have the money to buy books. Yeah, those no's came in fast. This is definitely a no. And this is where I struggle in my school. Rhonda, I love how you put those in all caps. Because this is what's happening. A lot of my teachers, and they have actually told me, I didn't have the money, so I just, or it wouldn't come in on time, so I just searched it on YouTube and we watched it in class. But if you aren't looking at whose channel, it kind of goes back to earlier when we were talking about brain pop and vocabulary, and I didn't specify that they have their own channel. If you're not paying attention to who the channel's from, you have no idea who these people are. And they may be great read-alouds, but you don't know if they have permission to read it or not. And if they don't have permission to read it, then it is illegally uploaded. And it's hard. I've done a lot of research through YouTube and copyright and read-alouds. It's really hard for YouTube to monitor this. So what I've done for you is giving you all kinds of resources. Every one of these are hyperlinked. That way you can click on it and you can have all of these. So let me kind of show you what they are. This one is, if any of you follow Book Wrangler, I love him. He created this. This is publishers of children's books on YouTube. And guys, there are so many publishers out there. All of these channels right here are all publisher approved, if not ran by a publishing company. And they have some amazing read-alouds on there. So if you need read-alouds on YouTube, then here you go. This is a great source. This is a great source to share with teachers, which, by the way, this goes in my pack when I send back to school for teachers. This next one is actually it's a big more, but hold on. Let me go down to this one. This is Indianapolis Public Library. And it uses the same ones that Book Wrangler had on the PDF that I just showed you, but it does it a little different. It has the images here. You click on the image, it takes you to the book.
My job.
And then this one's Brightly Storytime, which Brightly Storytime was one that was on that PDF. But I love this website. It's several pages. All of these are publisher approved. Also, you'll notice there will be links to PBS. There's some where you'll have the authors reading it. I think one or two have Michelle Obama reading them. I'm trying to think who else. You've got, I think there's a few Netflix ones on here. So all of these on those two resources that I have are all publisher approved, are all okay to use in your classrooms, in your library. They're okay for you to send out, put on your virtual libraries, whatever you have, whatever you use. Those are perfect ones to use. Great resources. We've talked a lot about permissions, and I've made a comment about you can get publishers' permissions. And then Ashley, you want to go ahead and tell kind of about Capstone's permission?
Yes, I'll try to put my little screenshot here in the chat too. They said that it was a violation of not only copyright, but it also gets into the rights for audio, visual, and there were a few other rights that are not just particularly for copyright, because not only would you be taking money away from the publisher or the author for the book, but also whomever would do the read aloud and all of the other aspects that come along with it. I popped that into the chat too. And this made me also, I was trying to look on YouTube. We have Craig O'Neill, who is a news anchor, pretty famous Arkansan here in the state, reads the Arkansas Diamond books every year. And I just looked on the THV's page. None of them state that they have been given permission to read those on YouTube. So
I wondered about that too. But I think, and I may have to ask Cassandra again, but I'm almost 100% positive that I saw or read in one of Cassandra's emails that the reason why it takes him so long to get them out is that he's waiting on permission. I'll ask Cassandra, because that probably needs to be put out there, honestly.
Well, it should be included in like the text of the upload, the caption underneath that their rights have been given.
And the thing is that news station should know that too. But I'm almost 100% positive there's an email, because I was kind of wondering about that myself. But I swear I read that, but I'll email her and ask, because that's been on my mind as well.
So I added that image into the chat. So they said that it not only violated copyright, but it can conflict with other rights like audio, read along, and video. And they're very nice. I know the Capstone educational president, and he said it's tough because we know that teachers and librarians mean well, and you want to promote reading, but it's not something that you are able to do.
That's what makes it so hard, because our heart's in the right place, but we still have to remember the effect on the market. This here, so School Library Journal had this great list of publishers. However, the problem with it is it's outdated. Most of them all went back to 2021. This link here is the American Booksellers Association. It is the most updated that I can find of publisher resources and permissions for now. This all goes to virtual readings. Okay, all of this is virtual. If you click on some like Penguin Random House, they are actually extending their date to December 31st of 2022, so of this year. I don't know if they'll continue doing that. Right now, their guidelines are fairly easy to get a permission. A lot of these booksellers, or at least they were, pretty much giving you permission as long as you followed a set of rules. Again, though, this is the more updated one. My biggest thing is you need to check. Don't just assume that you have full-fledged access to read a book and post it online. That's the biggest thing, and post it online. So that's just the newer updated version that I wanted to share. And then the last one is, it's an article from EdSurge. And this is, again, if you look, it was written in 2020. I've actually read some stuff, and I think I have it at the very end of my slides for you too, but some stuff from School Library Journal. But this is just an article about, can teachers read books out loud online? Now, it's deceiving, and I really don't like the title of it because it says actually yes. However, read the article, because it actually tells you, no, you can't just do it whenever you want to. It really gets into talking about fair use and when it's okay to read. So I really feel like it's deceiving in its title. However, it is a really good article with some really good examples of when it's okay to do it and when it's not okay. So hopefully those resources will help you for yourself or even for staff members, but feel free to share any of that. And then, so this next, I'm actually going to skip this slide because I want to make sure I have time to go over some other resources. But again, if you have the bit.ly, you can go back and watch this video. This is the introductory video for Creative Commons and public domain, which I have right here. So, we talked about not everything's covered under copyright, and Creative Commons is one of those. You have times where you have creators who are okay with it just being put out there for everyone to use. I've got Creative Commons licensing on this presentation for others' use as well. So if you don't know anything about Creative Commons, it provides a licensing system that allows people all over the world to license their own works in advance for others to share and use responsibly and respectfully. This allows you to use creative work like photos, songs, video software according to the way that the artist licensed it, and you don't have to ask permission. It is important to understand the different little licensing symbols. I don't get in depth with that with my elementary kids. I do mention it with fourth, but we do not get in depth to it because I'm still trying to do that early. What even is copyright? I want to get that good understanding first. I do want to tell you, if you use or Creative Commons any at all, they've actually changed their name. So Creative Commons is still there, but when you go to the Creative Commons search now, they call it an open verse. So it kind of throws you for a loop for a minute if you are a user of Creative Commons searches. But when you go on their Creative Commons website, it all looks the same until you go into the search, and they call it open verse now. Not sure why they changed. And then earlier when we talked about limitations, I brought up public domain, and that is anything that's expired copyright wasn't renewed, and then it goes into what's called the public domain, so it's free to use. So I told you that copyright on Great Gatsby is expired, so it is now in the public domain. These images here are hyperlinked, and these are just different resources to books, music, images that are free for you to use. These are good resources, especially in high school, for projects that you can give kids. And then we've talked about Netflix and Amazon a lot. But here are the resources that, that I mentioned that I wanted to make sure you had, and Ashley kind of talked about it too. If you click on this hyperlink here, it takes you to their list of approved content for educational screening. And again, it's probably not the movie that you really needed, but again, you can use anything on there. And then I've also linked their YouTube channels because both Amazon and Netflix have some great content on there. And once they have it on their YouTube channel, it's okay to use because you're on their actual site. And those you don't have to have subscriptions to. I also put this list that you can share and use however you want. I did not create this, but this another lady did, and she's given it use for people to use. But Creative Commons licensing, an overview for students and teachers. So this is a good thing for you to have as well. Talks about attribution. So ways when you need to give credit, and here are some things that you don't have to give credit at all. They're just out there, no copyright, really, really least restrictive kind of. But this is a good flow chart kind of for you to have, because again, the licensing symbols are different, and especially when you're working with older kids, you kind of need to know what they all mean. I do talk to my fourth graders about this, but this is a good, and I also talked to our computer lab teacher about using this when she teaches image searching. So it's a good thing to share this with your students when, and a lot of you probably already know about this, but you can change the search tools, the usage rights when you're in Google. That way the kids can actually see what is okay to use and what's not, okay? Now, this is different. So instead of you taking the kids to Creative Commons searches, you can do it both ways. But this would be you going in, and I really like to make a point with my kids, and I start off, and again, I use Harry Potter because it's an easy one, and my kids know it. But I type Harry Potter into Google Image. I don't change any of the usage rights, and I hit search. And all of these wonderful pictures pop up. Well, then I go into tools. I change the usage rights to Creative Commons licensing, and a lot of the pictures go away. And the kids are like, what just happened? So that's a great segue into being able to talk about Creative Commons licensing. I do want to mention, though, that if you do that with your students, and that's how you're telling them to get images, make sure they also understand they still have to look at the license, because not all of them can be used any way that you want. You still have to look at the little symbol. Do you have any questions? We all good? All right. I've also added this slide for you. This is just the public domain resources. So you can actually go to Google and just type in public domain, and you're going to have the websites come up. I just compiled them all here for you so that you had use. So you've got music. Now, again, there's probably a lot more, but these are just some good ones I wanted to share. Images and videos, and then literature. So public domain resources, and again, public domain, remember, that's why it's got that C with the line through it, no copyright. You're okay to use. And you don't have to worry about what kind of licensing it has. All right, so I want to stop for just a second, and we don't have too long left, so I'm not going to give you just a ton of time. I more just want you to, well, you might not be able to open it, so I'll show it to you, because if you don't have this on your device and you're just watching mine, you won't be able to. But I'm going to click this. I do this with my kids, and I've even done this at conference presentations too, but you can go to auto draw, and you have the kids, you might ask them a question, or you might tell them, draw how you're feeling today, or just draw a doodle, and you give them a minute or two. And so they doodle, right? It's all digitally, you doodle. And then I don't say anything else. I just keep going, okay? So this is an actual activity that I use with my students, especially fourth grade. So I'm gonna do the same for you. I've just kind of shown you the little auto draw. Pretend that you did a doodle, and just keep that in your head for a minute. Now I actually want to spend the rest of the time that we're together and talk about creativity, or copyright and creativity. This is the company that I'm an ambassador for. They actually have, there's 4 of us now. There's 4 state ambassadors. I think they have a few more, but there's really 4 of us that present at conferences for them. So there's me, of course, and then there's Missouri, Pennsylvania, and then our new ones in Michigan. And pretty much, I mean, they do pay my way to go to conferences, but it's not like I actually work for them. I'm just kind of like a consultant for them. But Copyright and Creativity is a completely free website. It was initially paid for by I Keep Safe. It's all federally funded through grants, and they provide free curriculum for K-12. Although I will tell you, after presenting at Oklahoma Library Association, I have mentioned that we should have some extra resources for public library and for higher ed too, because I've had many college professors stop me and talk to me about using this stuff with their students as well. But we have free curriculum, posters, office hours, which I'll explain in a second, and then we also have tons of professional development. So let's go to the website. Oh, and we were nominated as one of the digital tools for ASL Best for teaching and learning for 2021. So that was pretty cool. All right, so this is what our website looks like. You do have to register. It's super simple. Here's the reason why though. You register because this is how we monitor stuff for grant purposes. They have to renew the grant every so often, and they actually keep track, like they document all the different professional developments that we do for them or the different requests that they get, and they compile all of those statistics to be able to continue with the grants. When you log in, you just use your email. It's pretty simple. Okay, so this is the main homepage, and you can get a lot of things from here, but I am going to really talk about resources. And I'm going to kind of go through each of them and talk to you about them. Notice that we have curriculum for elementary, middle school, high school. I have talked to professors in college, and they've talked about they've used some of this curriculum with their college students as well, and it does carry over great. But again, I've been in talks with Copyright and Creativity to add more resources for them as well. We are also currently, we have been meeting once a week this summer, the 4 ambassadors and then the people that run Copyright and Creativity, because we are actually putting together a presentation and resources for teachers to teach other teachers. Because we've had so many people come to our presentations and actually say, do you have an actual slideshow that I can use to help me present to my own teachers? So we're actually creating one that isn't just our presentations at conferences or professional developments like today. So hopefully that will be on the website soon. We're still in the fairly early stages. We have been, it's been really fun to be able to create this, and then it has to go to the lawyer. He has to look through all of it, and then it will be uploaded to the website. But I'm going to take you to elementary first. Now, I told you earlier, elementary for them is kindergarten through 6th grade. The way that their resources work is it's grade level banded. So you can see kindergarten first, they all have their own lessons. I will tell you for my 4th grade, I use 6th grade, and then I use middle school resources. My kids, and again, I've had to go back with some classes, but for the majority of my 4th graders, they know so much about this stuff already that I do have to use other resources, and that's fine. Everything on here, again, is free. It will forever be free, but also you can change up, use whatever you want and however you want to. And let me explain that. So if I click on kindergarten, we've got 2 different sets of resources. The first is the PDF. This is great, especially when you're still fairly new at teaching at copyright, because it helps you with questions to ask the students. It's not 100% scripted, but it gives you lessons options, gives you activities that they can use. This starts off slow with copyright. So pretty much in this lesson here, respect the person, and I use this with kindergarten. This lesson pretty much shows a kid stealing another student's artwork. His name is on it, the name falls off. So the student who steals the artwork, puts his name on it, uses it as his own. Well, with kindergarten, I kind of do that to them. I mix up their art and I pass it back, whatever project we worked on. They get really angry. They're like, wait, that's not mine. You gave me the wrong stuff. And then we watch this video and we talk about it. And the kids really start to understand the whole respect the person. It also helps them try to remember to put their name on their work. But that's kindergarten. Also, not just the PDF slides, but we give you the full slides. So they've created the curriculum, but they have it all for you. So whenever you're teaching it, there are notes for teachers. There's notes down here too. But then this is what you actually show the students. You go through this lesson, has little activities. It's really short because, again, this one's kindergarten. The videos for especially kindergarten all the way to 5th grade, they are wordless. So I'll show you. We have actually had teachers tell us that they use this in high school for like drama classes to create dialogue, or even English language learning classes to help with the English. So we've had other teachers use it not just for that kindergarten level. All of these summaries and teachers' notes that are down here are also in that PDF that I showed you. So it's kind of however you like it best. They also have links. We do have a YouTube channel. All of our videos are on the YouTube channel. I've never gone to the YouTube channel because I just get it all from the website. You can actually go down. Whenever I teach it, because most of the time our internet's great, I just do my slides here. Some people like to go down to the Google Drive suite, and you can actually have all the curriculum there for you. You can save it to your drive, do whatever you need to. But the great thing about copyright and creativity is they give you the rights to use these slides however you want, as long as you give them attribution. So a lot of times what I do, especially with my older kids, I might take this lesson slides, but I take out some of them and maybe put in some of this lesson slides, and I change them all up. And as long as I've given attribution to them, I can do that. I can do that however it fits my students. Okay, so that's what's great about this website and great about this company. Because again, it's all funded by a federal grant. The middle school curriculum is probably my absolute favorite. And just because that's what I use so much with my 4th graders. This lesson is what I usually always start with the creators and consumers. And again, I've changed up some of the slides, but this lesson here is one I always like to share when I am presenting, because you can use it so many different ways. It looks a little bit different than what the elementary curriculum did. You still have your lesson PDFs, you have your slides, but if you don't have time for the full lesson, it has the videos here. I love these 2 videos right here, because I told you that I talk and use creators and consumers a lot with my students. When I first start teaching copyright, we talk about what that means to them. Have they heard of it? And the kids all tell you it's bad. Copyright's a bad thing. Some of them will even say, ooh, you've been copyrighted. Like copyrighted is a verb and it's bad and it's negative. So I have to really change that with them, because I need them to understand that they're creators too, and they're protected by copyright. That is where this doodle comes in. And we talk about, well, you have this that you drew, it's fixed. This is protected by copyright. Now, some of the kids were like, good, I spent time on it. I love my doodle. I'll have some kids that are like, I could care less. I don't care. Oops, sorry. I could care less if you stole my doodle. My doodle's awful. Well, then I show them this video called Magic Meerkat Moments, and then this one called Polar Bear Encounter, and their thoughts change completely. These videos are by BBC One Planet Earth. The Magic Meerkat shows the scientists and photographers, all the team out there with these meerkats, and these meerkats are sitting on top of their head. They're all over them, crawling all over them. But then the Polar Bear Encounter it gets a little scary. It starts off with they've waited for like 3 weeks for this polar bear mom to come out of her den, and they have just sat there waiting and waiting. So the kids are like, man, that took forever. Well, then there's a scene where the polar bear actually comes up to their camp, and it talks about how, oh, she's cute. But then the kids are like, yeah, but polar bears aren't, they're cute, but they're ferocious. And so it really starts to bring into perspective that, well, is it okay for me to steal their video now? You were okay with me stealing your doodle. What if you were the creator of this video? So it really gets us into talking about creators and making this more of a positive thing and why we want it to be protected. There are also videos in some of the other lessons that I love to use because it brings in people like Taylor Swift and Dude Perfect, and they talk about copyright issues with them or why copyright's important. And the kids are like, oh, because, you know, whenever you can bring in real world examples and not just hearing it from their teacher or their librarian, it means more to them. There's one with Wu-Tang Clan, which my fourth graders usually don't know who Wu-Tang Clan is. However, the example is great because it talks about how they made an album, but that album can only be in a museum, and the person who bought that album can never sell that album. And it's a whole contract that it goes into, and the kids are like, whoa, because it tells how much money that it could be spent for, but that album can never be sold. And the whole point of it is to show that music is art, and music shouldn't just be given away freely. And it really gets the kids asking. That's when we start getting a whole bunch of questions about TikTok and Snapchat and YouTube and all these other things. And I find out that the kids know a lot more than I do about stuff like how you can flag people on all these different social media platforms. But I mean, they bring up really good points and they ask some really good questions. So this is usually when there's some great discussions. And I do let my students lead the discussions with copyright. And sometimes that can be scary. And I'm just honest with them. I'll tell them, you know what, in our next lesson, I'll ask that question. And when we come back together, I'll try to answer it for you. I don't want them to think that I know everything about copyright because I in no way don't. This is the high school one. It works a lot similar to the middle school one. There's a really cool video, and I cannot remember which one it's under. But instead of the meerkats and polar bears with high school, they actually use one called T-Rex Autopsy to make the same point for the high school students. And then if we go, and I kind of watch my time, if we go to professional development, there is I think it's 2 hours. It's been a while since I've done it. Well, it can be more than 2 hours because it's work at your own pace. But we do have a free Canvas, and it's, like I said, it's free. You do not have to be a school district that uses Canvas Network, but you can go and do a self-paced actual PD where the lawyer, his name is, actually his name's left me right at the moment. I don't know why, but anyway, he is probably because I'm trying to hurry because I only have a few more minutes. But you'll actually see him, and he's going through all the different stages of copyright and copyright law. So it can be a little boring at times because he really gets into the legality of it, but it is very helpful when it comes to copyright basics and what you can do in your classrooms. Did someone have a question? Okay. If we go down here to, I'm going to skip this one for a second, but office hours and webinars. So we don't start them up until next week, but for the entire school year, we actually go from like June. We take the whole month, pretty much the whole month of July off, but we go from like the very end of July to the very beginning of June, and we have what's called office hours. Pretty much all that means is there's an elementary, a middle school, and a high school. You don't really, if you're high school and you can only make it to the Tuesday on elementary, it's fine. But pretty much all it is it's one of the ambassadors. I do the middle school on Wednesday, but one of the ambassadors and one of the actual employees for copyright and creativity, the two of us will be on there, and we're there for you to ask any questions that you have. There's been times when we've done small little professional developments for people who needed help for something. There's times that we just sit there and talk to you because we're just there to answer questions. We've had people just pop in for like 5 minutes to say, hey, I had a quick question come up and I wasn't sure how to answer it. We are there for you. And again, we start next week. So don't ever hesitate to come. It's free. And we're there I'm there every single Wednesday at, well, she has Pacific Standard Time, which drives me nuts because sometimes I show up to the wrong time. But I'm there every 5:30. We also have a back to school webinar, which you'll see me and some of the other ambassadors. And it's a little bit more formal than my presentations are because it's through copyright and creativity, but it's mainly just how to teach copyright. And it's going to have a lot of the introduction to copyright and fair use of it. I think we have slowly started adding in some of the slides about resources and situations, but mainly it's a lot to do with their curriculum that they have. They do archive all of their stuff, so it's there for you. If you've ever been to one of my presentations, and it's not on the screen, you also know that we have posters. And here in a second, I'm going to have a slide for you that you can fill out if you want posters. These posters are big. You can print them for free with the PDFs. However, you can get them shipped to you for free too. You can have however many you want. She has sent hundreds of them before. I know at ASL, we had a whole load because one of the school districts in Utah had requested them before we came. And so we gave over hundreds to her while there. But these are great. We've had people that put these above the copier in your teacher's lounge. I have given them to all of the librarians in my district. So it's just however you want them, but they are there, and I'll show you how to get those for free. Oh, how does one become an ambassador? You know what? That's a great question because I don't even know how it happened. Well, I do know how it happened. It happened with, if y'all know Jen Lyon from AIM, she, because I do exhibitors, and she asked me one time if I would contact Copyright and Creativity to get them to come to AIM's conference. And this was the year that everything went virtual. Yes, Jen totally threw me under the bus, Ashley. I tell her that quite frequently too, but she wanted me to contact them. And so I gave the lawyer a call and I'm talking to him, and he was like, well, we'll come if you will let me train you to be an ambassador, because at that time they really hadn't even started doing that. And right now, again, there's not very many of us. And right now they only have one for each state, but that doesn't mean they totally wouldn't want more people from each state. So I think, especially some of you are at different states, all you have to do is email. If you email this right here, just tell them you saw a presentation and you're really interested in helping out in your state, and they'll get back to you. There's only 3 of them that work there. 2 ladies and then the lawyer, and they're all great to work with. Yeah, free posters are wonderful and they're great quality. Dana in California is the one that sends them out. It may take her a little bit every now and then. She gets bogged down, but she'll get them all to you, however many you want. So let me get to that part. If you had questions about distance learning, there is a little section on distance learning that we've kept up, and it pretty much just kind of goes over some of the revamped laws for copyright, but I will tell you they were redone before COVID and all the virtual learning, so they still don't cover it 100%, but it does help you with any questions that you have. Here's the posters. This is just a poster request. Now you can email Dana at that info, and I'll give that to you in a minute, at that info at Copyright, but I will gladly send out your request for you. So if you just want to fill out my form, I'll send it all in to her. It makes it easier for her because she's not getting a whole bunch of different emails. She's just getting the one from me. And you don't have to fill it out right now. You can just write down my bit.ly or take a picture of the QR code and you can fill it out later. But yeah, if you're ever interested in learning more or being even an ambassador, just email them. And his name is David, by the way. It just hit me. I'm like, why can I not remember his name? There's only 3 of them. It's Sally, David, and Dana. And they are in California and Utah. So it's funny, all of the ambassadors are over here on this coast where they're over in the West Coast. And this is my contact information. Please don't ever hesitate to email me. And I don't mind sharing. I know I mentioned that to Terry earlier. Terry and I know each other really well, and she'll tell you I don't mind sharing anything if I have it.
Thank you, Brittany. If you guys have any questions, you can pop those into the chat for her. Or I'm sure she wouldn't mind on the Padlet if on the last section where it had questions, you can put those on there and provide your email address if you'd like some personal communication.
Oh yeah, that's a great
as
idea.
well.
Also, if you got my Bitly, here's more information too. I like to give you, anytime I find information, I try to put it on here. Research that I've done, things that I have found, that way you have it too. I just wanted to make you aware that that was on there.
I did also put a link to the session evaluation form in the chat. It will come to your email as well, along with your PD certificate. So please complete that. That always helps our presenters as well as UCA as a whole, the College of Education, so that we can see what sessions were popular and what to replicate next year if we need to. These PD sessions are always free, and we continue until the end of July. And I do believe that there's actually a session in August as well. The videos that have been recorded are available on our YouTube channel. You can't get any credit for watching those, but they are there. And if you have any questions, just either email Brittany about her content or me about the professional development. And I think that that's all that I have for today. Brittany, do you have anything to close it out?
I don't. I really don't. Just if you need anything, just please don't hesitate. I do not mind answering any questions. I've done virtual help. I've done all kinds of stuff for people. So just reach out and ask. And if I don't know, again, I will email and find out for you. Thank you so much for everyone